Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, and today we will spend the entirety of the class period talking about teaching and the responsibility of the teacher in developing a child. What does the word teaching really mean? Have you heard the word pediatrician? There is a word from French and Greek that means a slave, or one who has the responsibility for taking care of a child. We use in the medical field a term called pediatrician, but there is a word, pedagoga, which literally means pedia, which is the child, it can be a boy or a girl, and atris, or the attrition, which is the teacher or the caregiver. So you're looking at a slave, a person who is assigned the specific task of being responsible for taking the child from infancy into adulthood. Now, teaching, whether it's the medical or the parental, teaching is an art. It is a profession of taking the child. You do not allow the child to lead in the doctor's office, nor do you allow the child to lead in the home in the teaching. You allow the child to show you what they've learned. You allow the child to mimic what you've taught, but the child is not the teacher. Parents always teach children at every level. From infancy, they teach them how to talk. In the toddler years, they teach them potty training. In pre-K and K, they teach them how to interact and share with others. In the adolescent years, they teach them accountability. From infancy into adolescency, children are absorbing everything as they grow, and they become the model of what they have absorbed. Now, the primary question in teaching should be, what is the purpose of my teaching this child? What is the intended outcome after class is over? Once your responsibility ends from infancy to young adulthood, what is the outcome? What is your teaching strategy based upon? In other words, you've got to look at, do you have a plan? I understand there's no manual that comes with children, but do you have a teaching strategy as a parent? And every strategy from child to child, from home to home, might vary. In other words, as a parent, what are your strengths as a parent? What are your weaknesses? As you observe your child early on in infancy, you should discover what the strengths of that child are developing into. What are your personal weaknesses as the parent, as the teacher? Observe also what are the weaknesses in the child. As the parent, observe what are your opportunities to grow. In other words, if you understand what your strengths and your weaknesses are from the child being in your home, you should learn some opportunities for your own personal growth and also for the child. We call these teachable moments. What are the real threats to your teaching? There are threats in every environment. In other words, what are your limits? What are some of the social threats? What are some of the school threats? What are some of the other family member threats to you teaching your child? These are the type things that every parent must have a plan and look at, how do I compensate for every arena of teaching? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What are your methods of teaching? Do you only utilize lectures talking at your child? You have a captive audience? What about small groups? Do you allow your child in a controlled environment to socialize, to learn to assimilate, to learn to share, to learn the spirit of cooperation? What about one-on-one? It's one thing to drop your child at someone else's place. It's one thing for your child to spend time at school. It's one thing to drop your kid even into a little children's church. But the greater question, as the primary caregiver, as the primary pediatrician for your child, how much one-on-one time do you spend with your child teaching that child uniquely? Now, you may have multiple children in your home, and that's great to do group activities. But how much time do you really spend with your child one-on-one? Do you allow your child to experiment? Or every time the child is reaching for something, you say, don't touch that. Every time your child picks up something, you say, put that down. Every time your child walks toward something, you say, don't go there. In other words, do you allow that child to experiment, to research, to discover, to explore? Sometimes we categorize these children, especially when they're 2 or 3 years old, as terrible twos. There's no such thing as terrible twos. The child is walking, the child is becoming more verbal, the child has pretty much control over their balance, and they are excited about experimenting, they are excited about researching their environment, and it's all driven because now they are more observant of what's going on in their environment. And these are opportunities for the parent to teach. You are the pediatrician. Not just the medical doctor who takes care of infants, but you are the pediatrician. You are the child trainer. It's a two-part word, child pedia, and the trician part, we look at it as the medical, but we must also see the ending of the word gogamy as being the individual who is the leader of the child. So you got the P-E-D-A, the child, but you've got the gogmy, G-O-M-Y, who is the leader of the child. Teaching methods. 80% is driven by non-spoken, and only 20% is what we say. Now, let me translate that into another way. Children, although you may talk 100% of the time, for the most part, they're only going to walk away with 20% of it, and the rest is going to be driven by your actions and your behaviors. In the book of Galatians chapter 3, verses 22 through 27, the Apostle Paul writes, "But the Scriptures have concluded all under sin, that the promise by faith in Jesus Christ might be given to them that believe. But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith which should afterwards be revealed. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster." That word schoolmaster in the text is the same word that I've talked about in terms of the teacher or the pediatrician. The law was the director of the child, and it was given so that we might come to Christ. But after the child reaches Christ, another state of development, that child is no longer under the pediatrician, the law. So children are directed in life into young adulthood. And once that child reaches young adulthood, whether you've been a good pediatrician or not, that child is released into the hands of the world of work, the world of academia, the world of relationships, and then you will know how well you've done as the pediatrician for the child. I'll see you back in class again tomorrow. Don't be late and don't skip class.